Joining me now, Congressman from Arizona's 8th District, Representative Trent Franks. Congressman, thank you so much for being on the show, sir.
Well, thanks for having me on, Liz. I appreciate it.
All right, let's start with this question of the day. I'm so glad to get to talk to you in person about your call. Sir, tell me why you're calling now after 3 months for the resignation of Robert Mueller.
Well, the truth is, you know, from the very beginning, I thought the impanelment of, or the appointment of a special prosecutor was not warranted in this case. I still believe that. But as we've progressed here, the special counsel has, as you so ably pointed out in your opening comments, has continued to appoint people that are antithetical to any image of fair play or unbiased investigation. I should say prosecution almost. And you know, just recently now, I'm hearing that the special counsel has impaneled a grand jury. And you know, it just seems incredibly premature for something like that. And you know, if you look at the historical profile on grand juries, I mean, some of them would indict Mother Teresa posthumously on almost any charge that you could hold out to them. So the point is that it just seems like there's a clear indication that there is a conflict of interest. And when I looked at the statute clearly, and I suppose that probably prompted me more than anything, Liz, when I looked at the statute, it seems so clear to me that it says essentially that there's a conflict if a person has a personal relationship with anyone involved in the conduct that's being investigated. Well, that's certainly Mr. Comey. He's one of the only witnesses to the reason that this thing got kicked off, this conversation between him and the president ostensibly. And that Mr. Mueller is a close friend of Mr. Comey. And so it says even if there's a conflict of interest, it's been interpreted to mean that the person must step down, not may, but shall step down. So it seemed pretty clear to me that someone had to say it.
Right, and that's interesting because I've certainly heard the argument that it's unethical for Robert Mueller to serve in this position, and I agree with that. He has too clear of a conflict of interest in my opinion, but you're saying that it's not just a matter of being unethical, that it's actually unlawful here.
I believe that, and I would challenge the legal minds to come forward and tell us why the statute doesn't mean what it says. The truth is, if Mr. Mueller was called to be a juror, if there were a court case here, if this were a court case, Mr. Mueller would be ruled out of being on the jury because of his clear appearances of conflict. And I just find it astonishing now that somehow the world holds him out to be this unbiased arbiter when he is so closely aligned with someone that the president fired and someone that is the essential witness, as it were, of the conversation that prompted the grand jury in the first place.
Right, and let me ask you this, sir.
Special counsel. See, I've got grand jury in my mind here.
This gets into, I guess, the legal nitty-gritty a little bit, but if this were the case, if Robert Mueller is in violation of the law because of his conflict of interest, his close relationship, working and personal, with James Comey here, who would be the person or the branch of government that would investigate that and ultimately determine whether he was in violation of the law and how to hold him accountable for that?
Well, we'd probably have to have another special counsel to investigate the special counsel. But no, I think the one thing that would solve the problem is if the statute was put out on your screen and others so that people could read it for themselves and ask themselves, does Mr. Comey not qualify as someone involved in the conduct of this that's being investigated? And of course he does. And so it's, unless one repeals the English language somehow, they have a real problem with the legal framework here that they're having to deal with. And I'm just convinced that ultimately, if Mr. Mueller is going to use the law to go after the president, to prosecute or investigate the president, then it's very important that he be maintaining himself within the confines of that law in the first place. And I think that this puts him at tremendous odds and undermines his partiality.
Right, because it's such a position that wields so much power because there's so little accountability when it comes to special prosecutors that I think they do have to operate within the highest levels of ethical behavior. Let me ask you this, and this is another, I guess, nuanced question. How do we find someone, if we want to appoint a special prosecutor in such high-profile cases or investigations like Trump and Russia, how do we find someone who has no ties to anybody involved?
No, I think that's the right question, Liz. And I think, first of all, it becomes critically important, incumbent upon those who would appoint such an investigator and give them the kinds of power that a special counsel has to do so judiciously, that it should be something that can't be dealt with in the regular process, and to make sure that the confines of that investigation are clearly delineated, because special prosecutors or special counsels are notorious for going off the rails and going in every direction you can imagine. And I think that's what's happening here. I hear them talking more about Mr. Trump's finances than they do about any illegal collusion with Russia at times. And so I think the first thing to do is make sure you're not appointing someone just for political reasons, as what happened in my judgment in this case. And then secondarily, of course, it becomes very important to carefully vet anyone for an appearance of conflict, either that or change the law that says that that person, if they have an appearance of conflict, has to step down or has to step aside, because that's what the law says.
Right.
And the only way that Mr. Mueller at this point can stay within the law is to resign, in my judgment.
Right, and that's a good point, I think, that you make, that if they don't want to abide by that law, they do have the option to change it and remove that necessity for no conflict of interest there. Congressman Franks, we're almost out of time. Let me ask you one more question. There have been calls by some Republicans in Congress to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate Hillary Clinton, to investigate Loretta Lynch and how she handled the Hillary email investigation during the 2016 election. Do you join that call?
Well, I think, not to sound contradictory here, but I think the answer is yes, because the evidence, the body of evidence is so much more clear in those cases than it is here. And so, yes, I do. And I'm a little disappointed in some of the senators who've come out and said that they're going to make it impossible to dismiss, the special counsel, because I think in some ways they're just trying to look mainstream and reasonable rather than really doing what's necessary to accomplish justice here.
Right. I think you're right. They're afraid of the backlash, and they should not be afraid of the truth. Congressman Franks, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, milady. Let's don't be afraid of the truth. That's a good word.